Rightio, so welcome to another episode of Newcastle Unlocked. We've got a very special guest joining us today, Stephen Hunt. Stephen's a prominent figure in the local hospitality industry. His group owns 7 pubs across Newcastle, the Hunter, Mid-North Coast, notably the Kent at Hamilton, the Imperial at Maitland, and the Seabreeze up at Nelson Bay. So plenty of venues there that I'm sure we've all enjoyed. And he's well known for his sort of humble beginnings, I suppose, starting off as a backyard bar, building a thriving pub empire. And you know, I think that's really, you know, investing heavily in Newcastle and the Hunter, that's really solidified you as a market leader in regional, you know, New South Wales. So it's a pleasure to have you on today, Stephen.
Thanks, Brent. I don't often get called a market leader. Many things I get called, but that's thank you very much for that compliment.
Saying humble. And look, in addition to your entrepreneurial success, you've also a published author, recently publishing a book, Find, Build, Sell, how you started a $100 backyard bar to building a $100 million pub empire, which is great. So I think, you know, your story is not just about business, it's about community. It's also about the art of creating spaces, which I think is great. So we'll dive into that a little bit today about your philosophy in business and really about the future of the pub industry and how you're seeing things at the moment. So we'll dive straight into it. What was the motivation for writing the book?
Well, I was actually in the States fundraising, and I was about to do a presentation, a hospitality presentation in Vegas. And so I'd travelled from one side of the States to the other, and then was on the way to Vegas, of all places, good spot.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they basically, the world just started shutting down. So from each state I went to, more businesses were closing. And then my wife and my ops director were like, we've got to get you home. So I missed that opportunity to do the presentation. I'd spent probably close to 100 hours on getting all the information ready. And then I decided, well, I've come home, pubs are shut. Obviously, there's a bit of stress. So I started increasing what the presentation was and then adding it. And that just floated on to spoke to an editor. So they helped me. And next thing you know, I had a I guess, business book. So
book ready to go.
Yeah.
Sitting off the shelves. And what's some of the key principles summarised in that? What's some of the key principles as you've grown your pub portfolio in running a business?
The success of pubs is just based around your local community and connecting with the community, whether it's your licensees, your general managers or your chefs, because so many different people go to the pub. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you got premiers, you've got, you know, prime ministers, you got cleaners, all sorts of different people. Everyone has an opinion about how to run a pub, but it's really good. You've got to have that constant connection. And how we run our businesses is that the GMs have to get really involved in the local community.
Yeah, okay.
So they go to business committee meetings, they go to sporting club meetings. And, that's how we've based our business philosophy on, is just literally putting yourself in that central part of the community.
Yeah, okay, sure. Yeah, I think that's a good way. You know, obviously you finding out what service and what level of, offering you need for each, and every community is different too, isn't it? Really, you cover a broad range of different communities. You know, not every, you know, pub is the same, really, is it?
Oh no, and that's why I like it, because it's not cookie cutter. It's not like a McDonald's, you know, where you just basically use the same menu in each particular area. For instance, Newcastle being closer to the coast, there's sort of a different mentality and different likes and dislikes. And then you go into Maitland, which is only a 40-minute drive away, and that's far more regional. Do you know what I mean? So there's a different grounding and a different sort of mentality for both. Certain things cross over. People love being treated with respect. They love entertainment. They love good food. But there's all variances on those. So Newcastle's late trading. So, you know, you have a younger market there. Imperial in Maitland. You know, it's you get a lot of farmers. I like country western music. And, you know, so it's you know, we go further up north and there's a different philosophy up there as well. So catering for all of those is really exciting. It's one of the good parts of the business.
Yeah, great. And your experience now, you've got over 20 years of experience under your hat now, but when you first started out, what were some of the challenges and headwinds that you faced, kicking off this journey?
I started washing plates. Before that.
That's right.
Had the backyard. Yeah. Well, we had the backyard bar that I set up where I had a lot of mates who came came over, and then we just started making a little bit of money over that to my parents' house.
Mm.
And then I left school and then got a job in the pub,
Mm.
local pub. And then it was very lucky because the people I was working for were some of the best publicans in Australia.
Mm.
And even though I was 18 and more interested in going out and having a few beers, the systems that we learnt at that particular time, I still use a lot of those now.
Mm.
And just really fell in love with it, meeting nice people. It was in a pub where I grew up.
Mm.
So that's kind of where I got the community hub sort of situation.
Mm.
You know, I knew the cousins, aunts and uncles who were coming into the pub of all the locals.
Mm.
And then I went overseas and then worked in pubs again.
Mm.
So just the love affair just continued on.
Mm.
Thought about doing other careers. My family are all accountants, and literally all accountants, mum, dad, 2 older brothers, older sister. Then there was me who was like, there's no way. The tension, that it's too quiet. If you've been in an accountant's office, you know, you can hear a pin drop.
Mm.
That wasn't good for me. My sister, she didn't get into it either, but dabbled with that for about 10 minutes and went, no,
not for you.
I'm going back to pubs.
Mm.
So.
And you're saying you started off washing the dishes, and then, you know, once you got into the game, you pretty much need to do everything. You've got a team with you now, but I'm assuming in the early days there wasn't a big, broad team with you. You needed to really be a jack of all trades, I'd assume.
Yeah. Well, the good grounding was in those first few years. So you'd wash plates and then you'd be a glassy. That was the progression up.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Next time you see a glassy in the pub,
yep.
You know, that's a better role than it is washing the plates. Then moving up into management. But when my family backed me into our first pub, we had 10 employees.
Mm.
And after a while, it wasn't making much money at all. So we had a chef who left. And so I said to the other chefs, well, train me up and I'll cook on Mondays. And Monday and Wednesday, so they could have a break.
Mm.
And then cleaners, we couldn't afford cleaners. So we'd clean the pub in the morning, set everything up for the day, do your floats, put up your old TAB tickets, do all that sort of stuff, and then count the money at the end of the night because we couldn't afford it. So if someone didn't turn up to work, we would just do the work. And in fact, I still have one of the guys from the team now, and he's a partner of mine in the pub in Urunga. So he's got the same mentality. We had, you know, we didn't have a marketing budget, you know, so we basically got, there was some Argentinian soccer team. They used to play every Saturday at a park nearby, and a few of them could play a bit of music. So we said, well, we'll give you a few beers if you come and play in the pub on a Saturday night. So all of a sudden that crowd of 10, 15 started ended up being 30 and 40. So it's as simple as we just use what we had. And then, you know, as you get bigger, you have the luxury of having a bigger budget.
Yep.
But yeah, having that start at the bottom and knowing every single aspect of the business was really important for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you look, you're obviously getting opportunities put to you weekly, monthly, and over the course of 20 years, probably plenty. How do you identify the right opportunities, you know, avoiding the problem children, I suppose, in the pub game? How do you identify the right opportunities, ones that you can work with?
Well, I've got this multi-factor model where I basically plug in as much data as I possibly can. So a couple of the things I look at is the demographic, people in the area, development applications are in to see what actually is going to businesses and the plans for the local council. Then I obviously go through the figures of the particular pub and then observation, going in there and sitting and observing it. So if it scores about 70, 75 out of 100, then I'll have a serious consideration. And then anything above that, then I'm really happy to sort of dig deeper into the figures.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And proximity to where we are. So all of our pubs sort of tic-tac up the coast. And the furthest distance is 2 hours. But then it goes 2 hours, it's 40 minutes. That's an hour, and then it's 20 minutes. So proximity is really important.
Yep.
Being able to manage and having our team to oversee.
Yep.
But yeah, digging into it. Looking at mix of trade as well. So generally speaking, we like to have a good mix of trade, you know, good bottle shop, bar, gaming, food, and then functions, accommodation. So we don't want to have a one-horse race. There's some venues that focus on gaming. Sure, we appreciate gaming, but we also appreciate the food and the beverage and the accommodations.
Yeah, excellent. And you've obviously invested, and you and your fund have invested heavily in the Hunter, Mid-North Coast, regional New South Wales, which is, our sweet spot here for the podcast. That's really what we're about, is trying to talk to those that are investing heavily in our markets. What brought you to, what brought you here? What was your focus, and why have you chosen to keep investing? You've obviously done well out of the region.
Well, initially my dad's from Tamworth, and he used to come here on holidays. And so he always had that, that place when you're a kid and you go to a specific spot, how you can love it and you remember.
Affinity for it, yep.
And then, so we came up here a few times with him, and then my sister went to uni here and she finished in about 1988. So we came up a few times to see her. So I always loved the area. It's something that I think Novocastrians miss, and it's easy for someone who's moved here to pick up, is the fact that you could be having breakfast at a beautiful beach, and then you can be in the vineyards 40 minutes later having a nice glass of wine, but then you can be in Port Stephens, right? And you can be whale watching, and then you come back to Newcastle and watch a major sporting event. It's not, I don't know of too many places in the world where you can do that.
No.
And it's the easiest selling point, for domestic and international tourism. Hey, how would you like to go to this spot? And you can do all of that in one day.
Yep.
So obviously diving into that, I just thought this is a fantastic opportunity. It's growing as well, the area, the population growth. You've got a lot of people from different cities coming to move here. You've also got people from the country. So Newcastle is the big smoke for people who are coming from Tamworth. I know through my involvement with Wildfires Rugby, you get a lot of people from Coffs. They don't want to move to Sydney. They're comfortable coming to Newcastle. So the growth opportunities here, and for us investing obviously with our pubs, reinventing our pubs, spending a lot of money, it's been a goldmine for us. And obviously the people, I love the fact that in Sydney, when you've got to go to the city, quite often you'll park in Kirribilli and get a train across to get a car park. Whereas here in Newcastle and Maitland, people still expect to park out the front of the shops.
Yep, absolutely.
Otherwise they're like, I kind of like that mentality. It's, the population's growing, you can't do it as often. But I just think that's, I don't know, it's quirky. I think it's awesome. I think it's really good.
I think we'll take it while we can get it. I want to park right at the shops too. So let's not turn it into Sydney too quickly. And Newcastle, talking about it is growing, and over the last few years, we've really, attracted some wonderful acts to the Newcastle city. Really, we've had Elton John, Paul McCartney, Pink, major sporting events. How important are those to the local hospitality industry? And obviously you see a big kick when those sorts of events come to town.
Oh, I think it's crucial for the city's success and for the growth. I mean, it's fantastic to have, Paul McCartney play here. All sorts of age groups come to watch those events. And then the money that's pumped into the local community. So it's not just the pubs that thrive. Yeah, the pubs do, but then it's all the stakeholders that, profit from that.
Yep.
So your local butcher, he'll sell more meat because your restaurant's busier. Do you know what I mean? And the guy who delivers the meat actually is making more money because he's got more work. And then you've got people who sell toilet paper. Do you know what I mean? So the flow-on effects for the whole city and the whole region are never ending. And I think the council have done a good job. I think it's Functions New South Wales have brought a lot of people into the area, and they're really excited about bringing more people in. There's in Morisset, there's an entertainment centre that's going to be built for 30,000 people. So all of those things are just advertising the area for us, but just the importance to the local economy.
Yeah, okay.
It's huge.
And just on that, obviously, last few weeks up to the end of their run in the NRL, the Knights had been selling out every home game. Do you notice that when you come? Do you notice the crowds filtering through when or when the team's on fire? Or maybe an obvious question to ask, but even not just the home games, but when the team's doing well, do you notice the difference in the pubs? More patrons?
Yeah, absolutely. Get more patrons. We've in fact at the Kent we've put a little kind of sports bar space, which we didn't have before because of the number of people who love the NRL and the Newcastle Knights.
Yeah.
And in fact, if it's a close game and the Knights win, the profit of the pub and the bar sales are a lot more than if the Knights lose.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
good.
Very, very parochial. It's good for us, so we support the Knights.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's good for the town, isn't it? And look, you've been in this industry we've been here locally for over 20 years working. What has changed from the patron visiting 20 years ago or plus till today? You know, we caught up last week. We talked about the different generations. What's the visitor experience like, or the expectations like?
I think for a region now, there's more offering than there was 20 years ago. So 20 years ago, you had the pubs, you know, multiple pubs, which is great, but they're not at the standard they are now in terms of all the different offerings. So you might have had the old roast roll over the bar, over the counter, you know, and now that's turned into a $40 steak.
Yeah.
And there wasn't as many small bars, so there weren't as many offerings. You still used to get a lot of people who came to Newcastle because of the live entertainment. And it still is, I believe, in Australia, one of the best places for live entertainment to come to. However, you used to have, you know, you could have a soloist playing and not on a stage. And, you know, all of a sudden you see the girls get up and dance on a Friday night. It's awesome, drinking their champagnes and having a great time. Now that's kind of morphed into a big stage with a huge audio, and the offerings now aren't just, you know, your VB and your Tui's new. People are drinking craft beer. Their food tastes have changed, and it's kind of evolved with, I guess, what people want. You know, the standard of living in Australia is just out of this world. You know, you go to other countries around the world, and it's fails in comparison. But also too, we've had the lockout laws. So when government worked in with police, worked in the council, worked in with the publicans, there was the introduction of the lockout laws, which I don't necessarily agree with. They've been relaxed again now. But that was because obviously there were issues with people with obviously getting intoxicated and you know, being involved in incidents. However, now that they've relaxed those, it's because the different generation. You know, so when the laws were brought in, people were only 3 and 4 years old. You know what I mean? Now they're 18, 19, 20. They're not interested in what was happening previously, and they were missing out on opportunities. And then obviously everyone was in Newcastle. So watching the industry evolve has been really exciting, really good to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And the more it evolves, the more people that go to the pub, which is good for everyone.
You know, and even from those days, you've now got sophisticated, you know, license checking systems, and they're all interconnected across the venues, across the city. So that helps with keep out the riffraff and all that sort of problems anyway.
Yeah, it's great. The scanners, and then all pubs are linked up. You know, if someone's asked to leave one pub, you're sure enough you'll get a call or a radio saying this person's done this. And then there's across the group barring as well, where if you can get barred from one,
you're barred from all. Yeah, great.
So all of those things, CCTV, you know, soon they'll all have facial recognition, which is just taking it to that next level. So they're kind of a necessity, but I think a good thing. Do you know what I mean? Because interestingly enough, when we introduced our scanner to Kent, we thought a lot of people would not want to come there anymore for no reason other than, you know, privacy and different things like that. But the younger generation, their family were like, well, we want you to go there because it's a safer environment. So it ended up sort of increasing trade for us, which is something that we sort of didn't forecast.
Yeah, excellent. And, you know, we've just spoken about Newcastle, how it's evolved over the last 20 years. The ownership of pubs in Newcastle has changed, evolved, bigger players coming in. How do you know most of the other publicans around Newcastle up the mid-north coast? Is it a fairly close-knit group? And now you've got a couple of bigger players. How's that changed as well over the last
It's always been pretty tight. Like in terms of people owning the pubs now, it used to be mums and dads. But now you've got sort of conglomerates and funds who have bought pubs and spent a lot of money in doing them up. So that sort of component has changed, but there's always been sort of a camaraderie amongst hoteliers. There's kind of friendly competition at times. Sometimes it's not that friendly. But it's interesting because if someone applies for a job, it's very easy to find who they've worked for previously. And that's just through knowing the other publicans and making a quick phone call or knowing all the managers. So it is quite a tight-knit community. And it's not 6 degrees of separation. It's normally 2 phone calls. You know what I mean? It's normally ring one of your friends who knows that person, then they go, hey, call them, and you find out information.
Mm.
So it works really well for everyone, I think.
Yeah,
always trying to work together. So.
And you've just recently renovated most of your pubs?
Yeah, we've pretty much done six of the 7.
Yeah.
If not full renovations, just partial renovations.
And how important is that to maintain or gain market share? There's been some, if we take Hamilton, for example, a lot of the pubs up there over the last few years have been renovated, some significant renovations, but obviously it's a strategy for you as well across a lot of venues. How important is it?
Oh, you've got to evolve.
Mm.
Market share can move around quite easily, and people just generally do that. They'll go to one pub that's busier, and then the next one gets done up, and then the next one gets done up. And also just focusing on that offering. We're always working off our core. So like I said, with the local community, the more we look after people, that gets bigger and bigger. So yes, you will have certain people who sort of chase the latest and greatest. But if you've got a good pub, regardless of circumstances, you're still going to get people coming in there. So those people down the road who've been done up, do you know what I mean? They'll have them for a while and they'll come back. But it's a very important part of the business. You need to kind of reinvent yourself every 4 or 5 years.
4 or 5 years, yeah, right.
Maintain the business and then obviously look at major refurbishments. It's almost like you plan on one, you start that, then you start planning again, especially with development applications and things like that.
Yeah, well, the standard of pubs, especially around Newcastle, has increased dramatically, especially in the last few years. I think there's been a bit of downtime with maybe COVID and whatnot, but there's definitely been an uptick. And I think just generally the standard has improved dramatically, which is great. Great for, the patrons coming in for sure. So you own a few of your pubs in a fund, which is great. So I think 4 of them in a fund. Is that correct? So just talking about the nuts and bolts of the fund, you've got, how many investors do you have? What sort of returns are you likely giving your investors? And, how good of a model has it been to run it as a fund?
We've got 40 investors.
Yep.
They're all wholesale and sophisticated investors. So retail investors, as you know, they're mums and dads investing on the stock exchange. So we have to have investors who, tick all the right boxes in terms of income or investments that they own or capital that they have. And that started out with 1 pub and then grew to 3 within 12 months. And then we bought and sold. So now there's 7, but obviously I bought the 3 outside of the fund. Average returns, it's been a bit quieter this year because we've been refurbishing, but it's been about 12%. So that's cash return as well as capital growth. So since 2015, it's been really successful. There's a lot of compliance with the fund, which we sort of had to get our head around. So we deal directly with ASIC. And they're big on obviously compliance and audits. But to grow, it's good because we've actually had more investors who've come on board, friends of friends, and initial investors have invested more. So once we've kind of got that formula, so we're a unregistered managed investment scheme. So that falls under a different sort of investment tool that you can have, and obviously different compliance with ASIC. But yeah, it's been really good, and only having 40 investors, I know all the investors. So we can ring up and have a chat about, how one of the pubs is performing. And it's very easy to do. We have Christmas functions where everyone gets together and has a bit of a chat. Investor send-outs. I do a few videos just to keep people up to date, especially during COVID. It's been a very exciting journey. And obviously the synergies you get across the venues. We've had some managers who haven't really gelled in a particular venue, and we've tried them in other venues and they've flourished. So having that big pool of employees, all with different things to offer, has been really good.
Excellent. And you touched on it's a bit quieter this year. We've got an affordability crisis nationally. You're seeing that through the pubs? You're saying possibly because of the renovations, that was the lower return. What are you seeing with the affordability crisis? Is that really at the coalface from your pubs, the 6 venue or 7 venues? What are you seeing in terms of patron numbers, turnover?
Well, so
even operating costs.
Yeah, operating costs. So it's like a compression. Do you know what I mean? People got less money to spend because they're paying more for their mortgages because the interest rates go up. So you've got that aspect. So there's less money coming in.
But
But then you also have increase in wages and costs of goods. So you're going from profitability here, and then it's kind of squeezing a little bit for all of those reasons. However, it just means you've got to work harder to get the same result, because it's not my job to worry about what's happening in the economy. It is my job to respond to it. But anyone can go, oh, well, it's tough times, this is happening, that's happening. It's an easy excuse. And funnily enough, most publicans, when the economy is thriving, are talking about how great they are at running their business, including myself, because there's a lot more money out there in the community.
Yeah.
So people are spending a bit more. So when it started getting a bit quieter, we had good cash reserves. So we've reinvested back in our businesses, knowing that regardless of what is happening with the economy, we still have the best pub that we possibly can have.
Yep.
And if things were a bit quieter, despite all of our best efforts, then we knew that by upgrading all of our pubs and renovating, that we'd have the best chance, increase market share, and obviously improve profitability.
Excellent. And talking about, we've got a cost of living crisis now, but in the last few years, COVID's been a big impact. Initially, shutdowns, but then a big boom in domestic travel and spending. Can you talk us through, your headspace around the COVID time and, how that changed your strategy going forward?
I think for all people, hospitality, whatever industry you're working in, everyone really, there's a real shake-up. Do you know what I mean? We'd had a very long period of time, no world wars, no dramatic effects. Like my generation hadn't had any of those significant effects. My parents were born during the Second World War. Do you know what I mean? So this was our sort of generational wake up to yourself. The good thing about it was that everyone banded together, which was really positive in terms of everyone. I mean, stakeholders. We were talking to our bank and said, what can we do with them? We were talking to our insurers. We were talking to the mum and dad operators who were selling us seafood and fruit and veg. And everyone wanted to remain profitable. So everyone worked together. So I think that's something that can be forgotten quite easily when the economy's really thriving. One thing I did notice that kind of disturbed me a little bit was the fact that there was the Spanish flu in the 1918, 1990 after the First World War. And a lot of the symptoms, 30% of Europe were infected. A lot of the symptoms are the same as COVID. And a lot of the responses we had later, but we couldn't have done that from the outset. Didn't make sense to me, and it's easy to say in hindsight. But all the quarantining, all the masks, you know what I mean, all the shots, everything else, it already happened. History repeats itself. It's the same with hospitality.
There you go.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's the same with the economy. Do you know what I mean? It goes up, goes down, goes up, goes down. So.
Yeah. No, excellent. And you mentioned you bought and sold a few pubs over the last few years, and you've touched on in your book, rebranding a pub or taking a pub and reinvigorating it. What's your approach to that? What's the sort of indicators? You mentioned you've got your matrix that you work with, but how do you approach those sorts of acquisitions?
We kind of do it slowly but surely. Like the figures can't tell you everything, you know what I mean, about your mix of trades. So we normally get in there and try and keep as many of the team on of the pub. Then we kind of do an analysis. We do a little bit of capital expenditure to see, but then once we line up what we want to do, effectively we go full step ahead.
Yep.
And that's when we do our renovation. So if one pub is particularly strong on food, we go all out to do with the food, and then the rest of the business you'll see improve. One's got a big bottle shop and that's really successful. We do exactly the same. But baby steps, you know what I mean? Like gradually as we're learning, we sort of about a particular business, like it's not a McDonald's, like I said.
Yep.
And then remarketing. We've got a fantastic marketing team.
Yep.
So then we tap into the local community, and then we actually look at the history of the pub. Like the Kent was built 100 years ago, and that initially was they had a dog circus.
A dog circus?
Yeah. This is 1924, right? So it wasn't, email or Facebook or socials. But as the pub evolved, it went through a lot of tragedies. They had the earthquake and things like that. So Kent actually is from the town, obviously county, and their motto is Invictus, which means unconquerable.
Mm.
So when we were doing the fit out, we were like, pay homage to the actual pub that's 100 years old.
Yep.
But also don't forget that when we're doing the design elements. It's got that tough spirit, rigidity.
Yep.
So there's a bit more to it than, just going, okay, we're going to paint
Slap
that green.
a coat of paint on it.
I wish it was that easy.
And I suppose just to round us off, and look, it's been quite an insightful discussion with you. Where do you see the pub industry going, in the next 12 months, 24 months, longer term? There's you're always dealing with potential regulatory sort of changes and different circumstances. What's your outlook for pubs generally?
I think the food and beverage offering is going to grow and get even better than it is now. Competition for pubs is restaurants and small bars, anyone who sells liquor. You know what I mean? You can buy alcohol at small convenience stores now. And so they're all competitors. So pubs will keep evolving to provide that service, which is the next step up. Accommodation is going to be more of a focus. If there are changes to the gaming legislations, can't rely on that and as much. And more people are getting into coastal towns, obviously. But for us in particular, we're really focused on the accommodation side of the business.
Yep.
I see it being really positive, though. Pubs are exciting, they're living things. You've always got to be reinventing yourself. You've had to tap into, scanning and ordering online, home delivery, all those sort of things. I think they'll just keep growing.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much for joining us today, Stephen. I know you're very busy, but it's been very insightful and great to see your pubs are going well and investing heavily in the region. So thanks very much for joining us.
Pleasure, Brent. Nice to see you.
Well, that's all from us. We'll keep you updated throughout the year. Cheers.
Excellent.